Welcome back to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti, joined with Republican Kevin Kelly, Republican Charlie Copeland, and Democrat James Baker. We're talking about the heart and soul of the Republican Party and what happened to the Republican Party in Delaware. Before we went on the air, Mayor, you said to me, as you talked about the Republican Party and what happened with Christine O'Donnell and the Tea Party and the fight for the heart and soul of the Republican Party, you said, I don't like ideologues.
Yeah, I don't like left or right ideologues. They don't compromise on their positions. This country wasn't built on ideologues, it was built on compromise. You had the Connecticut Compromise, you had the idea of how the representation, you had the idea that you didn't have an elected court.
Let me back off a little bit, because you had the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists.
Well, read the Federalist Papers.
Okay, but they're ideologues. But they did compromise.
They had a whole bunch of people with different ideas about what, if you looked at Hamilton, if you looked at Madison, they were like this in terms of their opinions about the governing.
Right.
But they had to eventually come and say, this is how this will be.
But you wouldn't argue that they weren't ideologues.
Oh, yes, I could. Very much so.
They weren't? They didn't have a set of strong beliefs?
They had beliefs. It doesn't mean that you don't move.
It sounds like your definition of an ideologue,
they don't move.
Is not in their ideas, but
compromise.
in the action of not compromising,
right.
Which I'm not sure, is that the proper definition?
In my words, it is. I can compromise. I can make my own definitions for what I want.
You just did, I think.
I don't have to have anybody tell me what it is. What I see wrong in Washington, how many compromises do you see there? All the major bills that ever happened in this country was because the two parties eventually had to come to a compromise.
What you're really talking about, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is the Tea Party. That's the most glaring example of this.
I'm talking about the left is the same way. They don't compromise.
I think the bigger point is, and let me get to both of you to talk about this, the bigger point is that there is a faction of both parties that will not compromise, and because there's no compromise, nothing can get done. Is that fair?
That's my opinion.
And you see, I think that is fair as you describe it today. And you know, none of these things you can take a snapshot and say this is the way it is and this is the way it always was and this is the way it always will be. You know, back in 2009, 2010, when the Democrats controlled both chambers and the presidency, and they drove some things through with no Republican votes, well, you just stuck a sharp stick in somebody's eye. To expect those people to the next year say, oh, I'm okay now and I will work with you, I think is absurd. And so that was a failure of Democratic leadership to reach out, and that was the left wing that did that, to reach out to whether they were centrist Republicans or even ideological to the right Republicans and craft compromises. And that is still being felt today because those of us who believe in a smaller government and a less powerful central government look around and say, you guys drove this tank over us without ever asking our opinion, and so we're going to wait until we get our tank and then we're going to drive it over to you.
Isn't that what you just pointed out? Isn't that the aim of someone who considers himself an ideologue? Let's just take the Tea Party for a second. That they feel like they're going to keep pushing their ideas and not compromise until they're in the majority and they can have their way.
Look, their ideas are enshrined in the Constitution.
I get it, but is that true?
So,
what I say is that they're not going to compromise on
well,
what
I need
they
an example
feel?
of what you mean by
Cap
compromise.
and trade's not in the Constitution.
Of course, and yeah, listen, these things should be delegated down to the state level and then the local level and then the individual level. That is what our country was founded upon. We are living in a post-constitutional America. And I mind you, the Constitution is a check on the power of government, not a check on the power of the individual.
But there is no compromise on that.
On the Constitution?
No, on anything that the Tea Party believes in. You're saying every single one of their beliefs is in that Obamacare.
I don't think.
Let's take Obamacare for a second.
Yeah, I think it's an unconstitutional act.
So
it was sold as a non-tax, and the Supreme Court, which is stacked with ideologues for the most part, believed that it was a tax.
Sure.
You served as an executive for 12 years?
Right.
Could you have governed without compromise?
No. I can beat you up, but I still have to come back to you in council and say, okay, where do we cut the...
And can it be argued that a legislative body can be set up, sort of like the House or the Senate, to never compromise?
The House more so than the Senate.
Well, that's because it's Republican. I believe
No,
me,
no,
I
no.
get where you're going
I
with
don't
that.
want the government to
it
get
doesn't
things
matter
done.
who it is.
Everything they get done is a disaster for the most part.
we can, and that'll have to be the last word. And thank you so much. Kevin Kelly from the Philadelphia, I'm going to call you from the Philadelphia Republican Party. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks,
I appreciate it. Charlie Copeland, head of the Delaware Republican Party. Sir, thank you so much for coming here. I can't wait till you get a candidate or a couple of candidates.
We are strong.
You have guys right here that could do it.
We are strong.
Mayor, thank you so much. We hope to have you back.
Right.
Some final thoughts when we come back.